It is time for the Voice of Wrestling right here on voiceofwrestling.net. And of course, I'm your host, Chris Cash, alongside my man, Nick Paglino of ProWrestling.com. And Nick, man, we've got a lot to talk about this week.
I feel like we've got a lot to talk about every week.
I know, I always say that.
We've been on a roll. There's so much going on, for better or for worse, in the world of professional wrestling, also in WWE. We're in that post-Mania stride right now, but it doesn't really feel like it. We've had a big Superstar Shakeup, which I think was a lot bigger than we've seen in recent years, with a lot of talent switching brands, a lot of NXT call-ups, and now we have the greatest Royal Rumble, this major event, which WWE is really billing as sort of a second WrestleMania, almost like a do-over of WrestleMania, depending on what happens, taking place this week. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about despite it being after WrestleMania.
And it's funny because I always come on here and I talk about, we've got a lot to talk about, and I'm waiting for one of these days where I'll come on here and be like, Nick, we've got shit to talk about. Like, what are we going to talk about? And we'll just spend an hour staring at each other.
Well, I was going to say, it's just like, the show starts and, you're there and it's like, Nick, we don't have a whole heck of a lot to talk about right now in the world of wrestling. And then you cut to my shot and it's just kind of
like that.
There's either nobody there or my chair is just completely turned around.
Right.
I'm doing a show like this. No, that hasn't happened yet. Hey, I'm kind of waiting for it to happen, but we once again find ourselves in a situation where we've got a lot to talk about.
I am excited too because for those of you that watch every week, you can see that I have a new backdrop, little tin behind me, got some lights that light. I don't know if you can really see the lighting going on. Like, see, now it's purple. But I'm going to give you also, I've got kind of a second camera going here where you can see a little bit more of my actual setup. So you kind of got the computers in front of me here. Of course, the lighting in the background, the plaster on the drywall over here as we work. It looks like a little warehouse studio that we've got.
So in other words, watching this show for the audience is literally going to be like watching paint dry.
Like what? Exactly.
You're actually going to see this.
You're going to see the paint over the plaster over here drying. So
as long as we're slightly more entertaining than the paint dry, we're on our way to being a huge success here on Fight TV.
Well, let's kick it off then, Nick, with our main event of the week. It is the Voice of Wrestling main event, Nick, and I know we've talked plenty about Roman Reigns, but we've got to talk about him even more. The Roman problem reigns supreme in WWE, as the graphics suggest, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. But Bryant Burns of Voice of Wrestling, that writes all the news on our site and, of course, some editorials. He does a lot on our Facebook page. I love the guy to death. He's great at what he does. Posted something, I think it's been a couple of weeks ago, asking our Facebook followers simply, what's the problem with Roman Reigns? What do you have an issue with as it relates to Roman Reigns? And, Nick, I'm not surprised by the responses. Obviously, we have kind of the intelligent fans that follow us here at Voice of Wrestling and have for years. We've always had that crowd. And so, we kind of knew what to expect when we asked this question. However, when you're talking about Roman Reigns, Nick, I'm even at the point now where I want to preface by saying, I see a problem, a major problem in WWE, and you and I are going to discuss that. But I also want to preface by saying I'm a Roman Reigns supporter. I was a John Cena supporter when everybody was on the bandwagon of bashing him constantly for being shoved down our throats. And now, Nick, it doesn't matter how much John Cena steps out of the spotlight. That's never truly enough for the fans. They're still going to bash on him, insult him, critique him without cause in a lot of cases. And so I think they're a fickle bunch. I critique the fans as much as I critique the product, I think, these days. That being said, I understand where they're coming from. I'm a Roman Reigns fan. I think he's come a long way. I think he obviously has a great look. He's got a good bloodline. And I think WWE has something in him. But it does not change the fact in my mind, Nick, that there is a major problem as far as how they present him and the fact that they have this justification in their minds of why they could not turn a guy like him heel because of the merch sales that he does, how they want to position him as a top face regardless of fan reactions. And Nick, there's a lot to talk about on this subject, and we're going to keep it fairly short because we got a lot of other stuff to discuss. But I want to start off asking you, first and foremost, what you think WWE is trying to accomplish here as it relates to Roman Reigns. And maybe let's just start with a little softball for you as far as why do you think the fans are so reluctant to ever truly get on his bandwagon, despite how good he may have a match here and there, how good he cuts a promo here and there? What is the cause of it in your opinion?
Well, I think it maybe is a combination of three things. As far as the fans are concerned, I think it's a bit of the fans sort of feeling like they know better. Sure. And this idea that they know what the wrestler is or what the personality is supposed to be, as opposed to what WWE is presenting them. But I also don't want to come off like I'm putting the blame on the fans, because I understand what you're saying in terms of sometimes you have to take a step back and maybe critique how the fan is accepting people. We've talked about this in the years past with guys like John Cena, guys like The Rock, even when he was going through periods where he was being booed by the fans, and it not really being the talent's issue or the fact that, the fans don't like the talent. I think a lot of times the fans are rejecting the way WWE is presenting the character. So, number one, I think it's a combination of the way the fans are sort of feeling like, okay, we know what's best for a character. But number two, and I've said this before, WWE many times with their baby faces, even with their heels, they are very much attempting to force a square peg into a round hole. You've got a guy in Roman Reigns, and I honestly think Raw this week was a great example of that. You've got guys like Samoa Joe who are cutting these real raw promos. You've got guys in the past like The Miz and Daniel Bryan who were cutting these real raw promos on Talking Smack. And then you've got Roman Reigns who's coming out and he's doing the catchphrase. And that's what John Cena would do. The you can't see me, or the champ is here, or the hustle, loyalty, respect. And I think to a certain extent, fans don't buy that when they're booking the talent up against these real athletes and these real performers. Look at Roman Reigns' opponents. He's working with guys like Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe, who are being presented as very real fighters.
Sure.
Samoa Joe, we talked about this off the air. The guy really comes off as a legitimate badass. This is a guy that I really think could kill me if I were in the ring. Hence that organic crowd chant, Samoa Joe's going to kill you. And then he comes out on the mic and he's hitting below the belt with very what sounds like raw, unscripted words directed at his opponents. Paul Heyman does the same thing when he's on the microphone for Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, of course, is presented as that real guy. And then Roman Reigns comes out, and Roman Reigns is the WWE star. He's not that real-life badass or that fighter. Not to say that he can't be, but again, it's the way WWE is promoting him and pushing him. And that brings me to the third thing, the third factor, which is that WWE is constantly trying to build their baby faces and their heels in the same light. Now, you may say, well, that's ridiculous because there's guys like Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe, who aren't positioned that way. But if you look at the way WWE positions the top baby faces, and these are the guys that they want to be the face of the company, your Rocks, your John Cenas, your Samoa Joes, they're all presented in the same way. They come out, they cut their promo. A lot of times they try to do the comedy routine. They've got their catchphrase. That's all Roman Reigns did on Raw today, was come out and say, I don't know how I'm going to come home from Saudi Arabia, but I'm coming home with the title, and you can believe that. He ends every promo with the catchphrase. So they're desperately trying to use the same cookie cutter mold for every one of their top baby faces. And the problem is the audience doesn't buy it because it doesn't feel real. And in the age of reality, in the age of professional wrestling, when you're bringing in all of these realistic components, over on TNA, they had the baseball bat incident that they turned then into a work. You've got Samoa Joe cutting real promos, Bryan and The Miz cutting real promos, Zack Ryder cut a promo after the Superstar Shakeup saying, hey, now I'm over here on Raw, and you know why I'm here? Not for the catering, because he's constantly making reference to the fact that he's not used. Dolph Ziggler, I mean, he's become the guy whose gimmick is cutting promos about how underused he is in WWE. So there are all these realistic... I think I just lost my background. Anyway, all of these realistic, approaches to television right now that I don't think are happening with a guy like Roman Reigns. He feels to me like the definition of sports entertainment, as opposed to the guys he's working with who feel like real fighters, real athletes, and are presented in a much more realistic light.
Yeah, and I get that. And I think, Nick, something that you and I discussed off the air that I don't remember exactly what they said. I've got to kind of go back and recall that exactly. But it's something that we've heard right after WrestleMania, the Monday night thereafter. We've heard the announcers come on and talk about how it was a situation where, like, hey, this is a ruckus crowd. Sometimes they boo who they're supposed to cheer. Sometimes they cheer who they're supposed to boo. Really making a point about it. And they do that after WrestleMania. They might do it at Mania all the time. But this was just last week. On last week's show, Nick, they talked about, I believe it was Corey Graves primarily, because he's on both shows, making the announcement there. I don't remember what towns they were in for Monday and Tuesday, but making the announcement. I recall it being said on Monday and then me thinking, they're going to say this tomorrow too, because it caught me off guard that they said it. Because it's something where they feel like they have to tell the fans that are watching at home, this is not common. When they know, as much as everybody knows, Nick, that it's very common for fans to boo Roman Reigns or cheer Brock Lesnar or cheer Samoa Joe and start the chants for him. And to me, that's part of the actual issue for me. That is a part of the Roman Reigns syndrome and the John Cena syndrome and the problem within WWE when it comes to WWE being blind in a sense or refusing to acknowledge that this is just simply reality. They still want to make it sound like it's some sort of hoax, like it's a rare occurrence when it's not.
Well, yeah, but also I think it's their need, their obsessive need to control every situation.
Right.
Which is, Roman Reigns is a babyface. You must cheer for him. John Cena is a babyface. You must cheer for him. Telling you that this is the Raw after WrestleMania crowd, that, like you said, that this isn't the typical reaction someone gets, because they have to control every atmosphere, as opposed to allowing the reality of it to just play out. If the fans aren't digging something, go with that. Look how long it took WWE to embrace what was going on with John Cena. The John Cena phenomena, when they would actually acknowledge, and John Cena would acknowledge in promos, oh, you've got half the crowd chanting, John, let's go Cena. The other half is chanting, Cena sucks. John Cena would come out, and for the longest time, WWE and Cena ignored it.
Right.
But then they finally embraced, he's a polarizing figure here in WWE. Some people love him, some people hate him. Then it sort of became that became his gimmick. Just like Dolph Ziggler's gimmick has become, he's the guy who can't get what he deserves in WWE. That's what became of John Cena's gimmick.
Sure.
He was the guy that's going to come out and, and he would do it. His music would hit. He'd come out and he'd stand at the top of the entrance ramp and listen and hear the boos or the cheers, because you kind of never knew what you were going to get. I think when that happened, it at least gave him a little bit more. Not only did it give him a little bit more color to his character, but it acknowledged what was going on and said, it's okay. It's okay for the audience, just like in real sports. You've got heels and faces. You've got guys that the crowd really loves to get behind, and you've got guys that the crowd just really, they don't love to get behind. There's nothing wrong with it. Let it sort of evolve the way it should be, but WWE cannot do that. They are dead set on controlling the crowd's response. And I think, like we were saying before, Chris, and this is the reason why the Roman Reigns thing just has yet to work. It's how many years in the making that they're trying to get Reigns over as the top babyface on Raw. And the reason why it's not working is because the audience is too intelligent. They understand what WWE is trying to do. They understand that WWE is force-feeding, not necessarily, and I hear a lot of fans say this all the time, oh, you're shoving Roman Reigns down our throat. I don't think that's true. Not shoving him down your throat. It's not like Roman Reigns is on Raw for 2 hours and 50 minutes of a three-hour show. Right. Everybody gets their due time. What they're doing is they're force-feeding him to you in a way that you don't want.
Sure.
It's not that you're getting too much of him, or it's not that, this idea of, well, we want him to go away. I don't think they want him to go away, and because, listen, there was something about him that at a certain point,
sure,
up to a certain point, the fans did accept. Same thing with John Cena. John Cena was a megastar. The fans loved him until WWE started feeding him to the fans in a way that they didn't want. And so I think that's where sometimes fans get confused when they say it's like, well, hey, look, if this is the version of Roman Reigns we're going to get, then we'd rather not see Roman Reigns at all. We would rather see something that, I was just perplexed by that segment on Raw Monday night. He comes out, he says 4 words, his music hits, and he leaves.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I'm not really digging the way this is sort of heading into Saudi Arabia. I think the fans are just over all of this. I think they're over Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. I think they're over Brock Lesnar. There was something too that just wasn't working about the Heyman promo last night, which is, again, it's like he came out, it was the, still your Universal Champion. I think fans are tired of it. I think fans are tired of seeing the same Brock Lesnar over and over again, and they're tired of seeing the same Roman Reigns over and over again. And I think what we're going to see on Friday at Greatest Royal Rumble is, a sort of a standard Reigns-Lesnar match inside of the cage.
Right.
Reigns wins, and I think the fans in Saudi Arabia are going to love it. But that's not going to be a representation of the United States fans. I think when they return to the States, it's going to be sort of back to that. This isn't just really what we want to see anymore.
Before we wrap this up, and to kind of get to your point as far as Raw, and I don't know necessarily that I agree that the fans are over Brock Lesnar in any stretch, and I don't know that they're over Roman Reigns versus Brock. I think.
Well, again, though, let me just be clear. I think they're over the presentation that we're getting right now.
Sure,
we're seeing the same Roman Reigns and the same. That, to me, last night, that segment was pointless.
Right? No,
it didn't do anything to say to me, boy, I really want to see.
I agree with that, but to give them,
because Roman Reigns came out and said, "I'm coming home with the title." Believe that.
No, I agree.
That didn't sell a match for me.
No, I agree with that. But to give them credit, Nick, and here's my question to you as we start kind of, wrapping this particular segment up, is what is the solution? Because I think that's what they're trying to do now. They're trying to say, how can we present this guy that's not going to feed him to the wolves for 10 minutes with a promo? He can't match mic to mic with a Paul Heyman. We don't want him out there exposed to whatever the crowd is going to do that given week. We've got to protect him because at the end of the day, they may have a Roman Reigns problem, but he's still their guy. He's still the guy they've invested a ton of money, a ton of time, a ton of energy, a ton of TV time into. And so they've got to protect him at all costs. And I guess my question to you, Nick, I know what my solution is, which is really take him off some TV for a while. He doesn't have to have an injury to do this. I think wrestling could be seasonal in and of itself. Obviously, you're not taking full breaks from WWE altogether, yet you could take some guys off of TV, periodically, every couple of years to freshen them up a little bit, bring them back in a unique way. And I feel like that would go a long way. Here's what we know about Roman Reigns. Roman is not The Rock or even John Cena on the mic. He's not AJ Styles in the ring. He's just got a look to him. He's got an attitude to him, and he's got an edge that really does come off when they're presenting him in a good way. I remember writing a column about Batista after he came back, got booed out of the building because it wasn't his time. It was Daniel Bryan's time. I remember him cutting a promo and it really wasn't even a promo. It was a speech at the Hall of Fame. And I remember writing a column saying it was the best Batista promo that you will never see. All because it was him by himself. He wasn't trying too hard in the middle of a WWE ring. It wasn't produced. It was just him kind of making fun of himself with the tight blue jeans or slacks or whatever it was that he was wearing at the time, that he was being made fun of. It was him, and it was a great promo. And I'm like, that's what we need more of Batista. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing with Roman Reigns. Look, you've got the WWE Network now. If you take Roman Reigns after he gets beat, hopefully, let's say he gets beat, he got beat at Mania, he gets beat in Saudi Arabia, he gets beat, a couple of weeks after, Backlash, whatever, by Samoa Joe. Let him take some damn time. Let him take some time. Go reflect. Let him lose his smile. Whatever you need to do to sell it, to get him off TV for a couple of weeks. You got the network that could show some behind the scenes stuff. Reporters on Raw trying to go to his house, trying to go to the gym, trying to catch up with him. Can't find him, don't know where he's at. He doesn't talk. He doesn't do anything. Let him, but keep him relevant, but get him off TV. Then bring him back when you least expect it. I don't know how long that needs to be, but a little while. And then bring him back, at some point, and obviously let him ultimately go over Brock Lesnar. I'm assuming with the new contract, you've got Brock a little longer. Find a way to make that happen. That's my solution, Nick, at this point, because sometimes you just got to kind of, my uncle always said, walk around the building backwards when you're having a hard time at something, whether it was pool or whatever I was doing and competing in at the time. It's like, hey, just go out, walk around the building backwards. Basically just saying like, hey, start over, man. Just kind of go out, just, clear your head and start over. And I feel like that's kind of what they need to do with Roman here, because I don't see a solution in presenting him right now the way that it is, continuing to put him out there, Nick, for the fans to crap all over him, because it does not matter at this point. They had a good 2 or 3 weeks heading into Mania where he was actually getting over quite a bit because Brock was nowhere to be found, and they were playing that up really well. But then as soon as Brock's back, as soon as reality sinks in that, hey, Roman could actually win this thing, it's right back to where they were. They do not want him on top, and I don't know that it's ever going to change completely, but I know that you're not going to achieve what you want with him, presenting him the way that you are continuously like it is now. I feel like maybe taking a step back, Nick, bringing him back at some point could kind of just restart some stuff for him. But that's the only solution I see. Do you have a solution to the problem WWE sees itself having at this point with Roman Reigns?
Really, the solution to me is figure out what worked. What worked in the past? What is it about him that's unique that people can latch onto? Don't, like you just said it yourself. He doesn't have the in-ring ability as an AJ Styles, so don't push him as a technical superstar. He doesn't have the mic ability, the promo ability as, say, a John Cena or a Rock or a Steve Austin. So don't have him in the ring cutting these long, scripted promos. And this is one of the problems that WWE has with him, is that they are pushing him as this. He's not a comedian. He doesn't have the comedy chops like The Rock does. Quit making him do the comedy bits. Quit making him come out and do everything that you've had other baby faces do in the past that have been successful, and focus on what is unique about him. To me, one of the most unique things about Roman Reigns, like you said, is his look, but specifically his size and his physicality. He has won over the crowd in the past. I think he universally won over the crowd in his first match against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, when everyone just couldn't believe what a physical match that was. That's how he needs to be presented, as the guy who comes out, he doesn't say a word, he just gets to the action. He just fights, and you just get to see that raw, naked aggression out of him and that physicality that makes him interesting and sets him apart from other wrestlers. Again, find what makes him unique and push that, as opposed to pushing other gimmicks and other characters from the past on to Roman Reigns.
Well, we want to know what you guys think about it and how they can fix this, because there is a serious issue, and I think it's affecting the entire product at this point, unfortunately, and hopefully they'll be able to figure something out. That's the main event, though, for the Voice of Wrestling. And Nick, we want to jump into a big event that's coming up. And Nick, I know a lot of people have talked about it in a lot of different ways. First and foremost, before we wrap up completely Roman Reigns talk, let's talk obviously about the great Royal Rumble event, the greatest Royal Rumble event that's coming up this Friday. Interesting time for a lot of these guys. But Nick, real quick, because we'll talk a little bit about our predictions. Roman Reigns, is this the time? Do you expect him to beat Brock Lesnar this Friday? And just a follow-up to that, should he beat Brock Lesnar?
No, I don't think he should. I like this idea that he cannot beat Brock Lesnar, that he cannot win the match. I would really like to see him lose to Brock Lesnar. I'd like to see him go on to Backlash in a position where, he's on a losing streak, he can't win the big match, and then Samoa Joe seizes that opportunity to beat Roman Reigns at Backlash. I'd love to see a slump. WWE has done that in the past with top guys. I'd really like to see it right now with Roman Reigns. I think it would be something really fresh. Here's a guy who can't win the big match. And then how does he rebound? Like you said, perhaps it's a going back to the drawing board type scenario, even in the storylines where it's acknowledged that he's going back to the drawing board because he doesn't know what to do. He can't win that big match. He can't defeat Brock Lesnar. I just don't feel like the time is right. If it didn't happen at WrestleMania, I don't understand why it's going to happen. I mean, listen, I understand the idea of, we understand why they're doing this show in Saudi Arabia. It's the start of a very long-term relationship. There's a truckload of money in it here for WWE, so I can understand them doing it for those purposes. But purely from a storyline perspective and from a fan perspective, if it didn't happen at WrestleMania, I don't see why it needs to happen just a couple weeks later on a show that's taking place in the middle of the day on a Friday. It just seems like if you were going to pull the trigger with having him beat Brock Lesnar, you'd have that happen at WrestleMania 34. So having said all that, I do believe he's going to win. I don't expect Brock Lesnar to be around for very much longer. I would be very surprised if Brock Lesnar is still around after SummerSlam. So the question becomes this. If Roman Reigns is your guy and Roman Reigns is going to win the title, what difference does it make whether he wins it on Friday in Saudi Arabia or he wins it in Brooklyn, New York at SummerSlam, which is only a couple months away, and he's going to get booed out of the building by that New York crowd? Are they really going to be able to do something completely transformative to his character between now and August? It's 4 months away, where all of a sudden the crowd's just going to absolutely love him and can't wait to see him win the title? No. So if Roman Reigns is the guy, I think we can both agree he is the guy, whether we like it or not, whether we like the presentation of him or not, he is the guy. You do it at Saudi Arabia because he's got the best chance of getting over with the crowd there, getting that huge pop from the crowd there. It pleases Saudi Arabia because they've given him a big moment. It helps really kick off that new long-term relationship. Yeah. And it saves Roman Reigns from getting booed out of the building at a major pay-per-view like a SummerSlam.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think, I'm going to say my prediction is that Roman Reigns does win for the reasons you just said. I don't think that he should, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why not give him his moment at WrestleMania? Especially when you held back from giving so many other people their moments at WrestleMania. Why not give him that moment? And so I think that they did that specifically because of the Saudi Arabia deal and giving them a huge moment. And then also still, in a way, like you're saying, a little shock and awe. People expected Roman to win. They wanted to switch that up a little bit. But also say, hey, let's protect our guy. Let's put him over in Saudi Arabia, where the fans are 100% going to be on his side considerably more than they are back here in the States. So I'm going with you. I think that Roman Reigns wins. I don't think that he should. I think I like the gimmick of, hey, let him not be able to beat Brock, and then let's take him out for a little while and maybe refresh him. I don't expect that to happen in any way, shape, or form, but I wish they would, and maybe we'll get surprised here, and maybe Brock does go over. Nick, let's talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia, because in the end, there's some interesting stuff coming out, and I know Triple H did an interview where he had to kind of respond to some of the criticisms of that, and we're going to talk a little bit about the actual card real quick too. But just in general, I guess I think you and I will probably, I think our politics in a lot of ways are similar. It seems like these days everybody's a saint and a do-gooder in a sense that they feel like it's their place to kind of step up and talk about all the moral wrongdoings of everybody else. And I'm not saying that they don't have a legitimate gripe, but I also don't know why this is the battle they want to choose to kind of rise up for. There's been some recent instances, Nick, of the women's Royal Rumble or Battle Royal, whatever, at Mania being renamed because fans kind of wanted to then step up, and of course the sponsors obviously did as well, which you have to listen to at that point. But the fans in general now deciding to kind of be these social justice warriors all of a sudden, and I'm all for people speaking out about things they truly believe in. When you look at how far women have come in the United States, number one, which is really the people that are griping, most of them are United States citizens from what I can tell, that are having these issues. You really don't have a lot to say as it relates to what WWE is doing specifically as a company for these for women. What the United States has obviously done over the previous couple of decades now to start giving them equal opportunity and equal rights. In my mind, I think there's still a long ways to go in some instances, in some ways. But I also think WWE, without a question, is putting their best foot forward as it relates to women main eventing pro wrestling on a wide, very large scale. There's already talk of maybe WrestleMania next year main eventing, women main eventing that match with Ronda Rousey and maybe Charlotte. I mean, there's talk of that. I don't think anybody has a gripe, and that's not what they're saying here, Nick, but what they are saying is that WWE maybe should take more of a stand as it relates to how Saudi Arabia treats their women and views women in general. And of course, the women are not making the trip over there. I really don't understand this battle, and I am normally going to lean a little left as it relates to social issues, Nick, but this is one of those things where I don't understand how people can expect WWE to, A, not have this relationship, not make the insane amount of money that this arrangement and this agreement, this relationship is offering them, and how fans can expect WWE to think it's their place to dictate what another country says is okay as it relates to women or not, whether it's right or wrong, and we'll all agree that it's wrong. But why now? Why this? And why should Triple H be going on and having to defend their position here? I really don't get it.
Well, again, because I think, and you could look at this a couple different ways, with WWE going there, and we have to remember that this isn't a one-off deal here
True.
the Greatest Royal Rumble show. This is the beginning of a long-term relationship. And Triple H did say in an interview with The Independent, and for those of you listening right now, you can check out the interview. We've posted it up on ProWrestling.com. You can take a look at some of the excerpts. Triple H did say that WWE has been in communication with Saudi Arabia about the potential, maybe down the line, for women to be involved. Of course, we saw what happened when WWE was in Abu Dhabi. And, that was a historical moment, as that was the first time WWE women were performing in Abu Dhabi. So if there is the potential here for WWE to affect real change, because I agree with you, Chris, that we don't have the right to tell other countries what to do. But what we do have the right to do is say, we're not going to go to your country and we're not going to give your country our business because we don't like the way you're treating the people in your country. That is absolutely our right, or any company's right in the United States, to say, we choose to not do business with you because we don't like this. And I think my opinion here would be that if this was a one-off, if all the Greatest Royal Rumble was one live event that was taking place in Saudi Arabia for a boatload of money, let's say WWE stood to make $1 million off of it, and they were going there to take the money and come back, then I would agree. I would agree more with those who are really criticizing WWE here. And I would say, you're really doing this just to go over there, make a quick, pocket some change real quick and come back.
Right.
And in the process, you are sending this message that it's okay to leave the women at home. But I don't think that's what's happening here. From everything that we've seen, and guys, also, I encourage you to go over to ProWrestling.com. We've done some exclusive reporting throughout this week. That's over there. We've got some videos and some interview footage with Mojo Rawley and Mark Henry, exclusive to ProWrestling.com. You can take a look at it now. It's up on the homepage. And in one of the videos, Mark Henry is talking about some of the changes that are taking place in Saudi Arabia right now, and WWE potentially affecting some change and helping Saudi Arabia. I think the phrase he used was advancements in Saudi Arabia and what WWE's role could be there. So in that regard, and because we know this is a long-term deal and a long-term relationship, there's been talk of making this Greatest Royal Rumble an annual event. If this is successful on Friday, this could be something they do every year.
Sure.
Can you imagine if you go from whatever the card looks like this Friday to, say, in 2 years, you've got 2 high-profile women's title matches taking place? Then you'd have to look back on this and say, what a great thing it was that WWE did this, because they are now creating real, tangible change in this country. So.
Sure.
In a way, Chris, I think it's too soon to judge WWE's actions. Let's see where they are in a year, in 2 years, when they revisit Saudi Arabia. Let's see what kind of progress and what kind of work they can actually do there.
Yeah.
And then we can look back on it and in hindsight say, what a great move this was, or what a terrible move this was.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be an interesting time politically for WWE and what they are wanting to accomplish there, whether they actually do accomplish it or not. I definitely think it's something where, as fans, we should enjoy what we're getting. It's still head and shoulders at this point compared to where we were even a decade ago, and there was some good women wrestling going on there, but obviously it's head and shoulders above what it used to be. There is a time and place to kind of bring these issues up, and I think obviously, Nick, that will happen at some point as this relationship matures, and we'll be able to see how active WWE is actually trying to be in affecting change over there, and it would be an amazing situation if they are able to do that. But let's talk a little bit more, as far as substance now goes, as it relates to the actual event itself. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the the card. And let's talk about, the Royal Rumble. There's some big names in it, Nick. We know that much. And I guess I'm curious to if this is going to be an annual event, if this is going to be something, Nick, where they're really wanting to put a lot of stock into, not just because of the new relationship with Saudi Arabia, but what it could mean for the guy that actually wins this, which I think, whether there's a title shot on the line after the fact or not, we clearly know that it's a big deal for the person to win the first ever 50-man Battle Royal or Royal Rumble. And therefore, I think they have to carefully select, Nick, who that person's going to be. It's got to be something they're ready to ride and ride high. So any names that you want to throw out there as you're most likely to win the greatest Royal Rumble this Friday?
Well, if you want to sort of keep that momentum going, I would go with Braun Strowman. This is a guy who didn't have a great showing at WrestleMania. It was more or less a sort of a comedy entertainment role he had. If you kind of wanted to thrust him back into serious contention, which, look, if the winner of the Royal Rumble match in January headlines WrestleMania, then you have got, logic would only dictate that a guy who wins a match that has 20 more competitors, is a 50-man Royal Rumble match, has to be considered thrust right into top title contention in WWE. Whether or not they want to, actually put the stipulation on it that whoever wins is going to main event, I think that's I think the stipulation should be. Whoever wins this Royal Rumble main events SummerSlam. Now we are further out. January to April, and the pay-per-view typically takes place, Royal Rumble, in that last weekend of January. So you're really only going through all of February and all of March. It's sort of like a 2.5-month period. This is a considerable amount of time more. You've really got those slower months. You've got May, June, July. But like I just said, they're slower months. They're typically not massive storyline months. You're not seeing top title changes usually taking place in June. So I really would have no problem with them awarding the winner of the Royal Rumble match, of the greatest Royal Rumble match, a shot at headlining SummerSlam. And I think it would be a good role for Braun Strowman because he's on, he needs that sort of momentum boost. Now, we've talked about this in the past with Royal Rumble winners. Who do you give it to? Do you give it to a guy who's already sort of on top? WWE has really sort of solidified the fact that Braun Strowman, whether or not he's getting title shots, he is one of those top guys on Raw and in the company in general. So does he need that win? Or do you give it to someone who could really use a Royal Rumble win, like a Drew McIntyre, or someone who's, a Bobby Roode, a guy who really is sort of maybe moved around in the Superstar Shakeup, is kind of lost in that mid-card, and really needs that win to boost him to the top. I'm always in favor of those guys winning Royal Rumble matches, but I haven't seen that play out in years. Really WWE gives those big wins to stars who I don't necessarily think need it. They're already sort of bona fide main event guys. So if WWE is going to go in that direction, which they typically do, I'm going to go with the precedent that's been set here. My pick is Braun Strowman.
All right, no, I'm gonna kind of go with you there. I think that obviously a Braun Strowman win is big for him. In fact, I think he needs something right now. I think they've been pushing the comedy envelope a little bit with him. Obviously, WrestleMania was a big letdown and really a waste of time, I think, for a lot of people as far as in their minds as it relates to Braun and his future there. I think, and plus it makes a lot of sense. I mean, regardless of whether he actually ends up winning, I definitely feel confident that Braun Strowman's a guy that's going to come in there, kind of have the Kane effect where he eliminates 15 20 people probably set some sort of record just to put him over, which could indicate that he doesn't end up winning it as much as it could mean that he does. But I like the idea of a Braun Strowman winning this. It makes a lot of sense. And he was actually my pick before you had mentioned it. So I'm gonna stick with it and say I hope that Braun wins. I think he makes a lot of sense at this particular moment right now. But there are some other guys that could make some sense as well. Like you had mentioned, the Drew McIntyre. I can say the other side of a Dolph Ziggler. I can say someone like a Kevin Owens, and or a Sami Zayn makes a lot of sense at this point because they kind of need some help individually as strong as they are a duo. I don't expect them to win, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone like that kind of gave is given a shot. Now, if it comes out between now and then, which I don't see how it really could, so it would have to happen after the fact. But if it ever did become a part of it, Nick, where they got to headline Survivor Series, then I really honestly think that this event, regardless of the time that it happens, could really be something that people look forward to every single year. It's not going to be one of your big four, but it's going to be something where it really does have a lot of stakes at play, and I hope they find a way to incorporate some real value behind this actual match itself. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course, the other side of the things that that we're looking forward to, and some interesting stuff. Of course, Chris Jericho, who was going to be in a match with The Undertaker after Rusev was going to be, and now I guess before Rusev is again, he's now going to be in that 50-man battle royal, and I think that's going to be an interesting play. But however, you do now have Undertaker and Rusev in a casket match. And Nick, the nostalgic part of me is really looking forward to seeing a casket match back on WWE television. I'm looking forward to that. Just because, look, I mean, I remember being a kid and seeing that, and I feel like that was just kind of part of the Undertaker's staple. And I know that he's not the same guy anymore. But after, and you and I think, talked about this, and maybe we have a slight disagreement, Nick, but I know you and I discussed the idea that this is kind of WWE giving you something after what happened with Mania and everybody criticizing, and rightfully so. I don't think there's any justification or excuse for what they put out between John Cena and The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And therefore, I really think this is kind of their way of saying, we're sorry. We screwed up. Here you go. Here's a casket match. Here's The Undertaker in a rare non-Mania main event on a big show, at least as far as the way they're presenting it. Here's our token of I'm sorry to you. And I think that, like, look, whether you're really excited about The Undertaker in a casket match or not, Nick, I think knowing how much of a Rusev fan you are because of what he's established organically by himself with Rusev Day and everything that they've got going on, I feel like you, along with all Rusev fans, have to chalk this up as a major win for someone like Rusev, regardless of how the reality stuff has kind of played into this, the TMZ video and everything. Without all of that, I think this is a good thing for Rusev. With some of that controversy and Chris Jericho in, now he's out, now Rusev's back in after he was out. I feel like, Nick, Rusev fans have to, and Undertaker fans have to kind of be looking forward to this, even if there's not real meaning behind it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction here, only because, and this is going to be the difficulty of this show in general, is that what you're going to be this is a good way, I think, to explain to it. If someone had never seen a WWE show before, and let's say you had a guy who's maybe he watched WWE years ago, maybe he's in his 30s and hasn't watched WWE in years and years, and you were to show him the greatest Royal Rumble as the first WWE event that he's seen in years, he's going to get a very, very different idea of what WWE is than what you're used to seeing when you're watching it in the United States and the way United States audiences react.
And what's wrong with that? Like what?
Well, what's wrong with that is, again, as a Rusev fan, I'm used to seeing the way people are latching on to the Rusev Day stuff and the Rusev Day gimmick. But I fully expect Rusev to be a big heel in Saudi Arabia because Undertaker is going to be the big babyface. And he's going to come out and he's going to get his huge babyface reaction, and Rusev's going to come out, and who knows, I don't know if they'll chant Rusev Day. They'll probably boo him. The match will be nothing. It'll probably be a couple of minutes, just like what we saw at WrestleMania. The Undertaker will make quick work of him. But again, then the question will become, how does Rusev benefit from that? Because that's not who Rusev is when he's on American television. Once he comes back to the States, it's a different reaction. It's going to be the same thing as a guy like Roman Reigns. I mean, if Roman Reigns wins that title and gets that huge pop from the Saudi crowd, he's not going to come back to the United States 3 days later on Raw as the new champion, if he's in a city like a Boston or a New York or a Chicago, and all of a sudden get this huge, tremendous response from the crowd. So you're presenting, and I think that's one of the reasons why they changed the match from Jericho. Because they figured probably, and this is what I thought all along, I don't think it has anything to do with the TMZ stuff or anything he was tweeting on social media. I think this all comes down to the fact that you have not seen Chris Jericho in a while. And Chris Jericho, the last time he was around, was arguably doing some of his best work that he's ever done in WWE. He would get a huge pop from that crowd in Saudi Arabia. And I think WWE is afraid that that would take away a little bit. It's not like no one's going to pop for The Undertaker, but you just saw The Undertaker at WrestleMania. The real return, if you're looking at Undertaker versus Jericho, is Chris Jericho. He's the guy who's really returning that we haven't seen in a while. So I think WWE is thinking, you know what? This is babyface versus babyface in Undertaker versus Jericho. Let's throw Rusev in there, because at the end of the day, WWE is still pushing Rusev as a heel, on SmackDown, and I think he's going to be received as a heel. So, again, in general, I just feel like a lot of the responses you're going to get from this Saudi crowd are not, it's going to be a mirage. It's not going to be the way audiences really respond to these talents when they're in the United States.
Going to be interesting to see. We'll obviously talk about the greatest Royal Rumble event next week on The Voice of Wrestling, so make sure you check that out, voiceofwrestling.net. Of course, Fight TV as well, FITE. Download the app and check us out there on our own exclusive channel. Nick, we debuted it last week. We were going to try and do a special episode, but some scheduling conflicts didn't allow us to do our own SmackDown edition of a new segment we like to call Tag In, Tag Out, but we're going to do it right now because we need to wrap up the Superstar Shakeup and talk about who moved over to SmackDown, and now also talk a little bit about who won between Raw and SmackDown as far as the new rosters they have after the shakeup. So, Tag In, Tag Out starts right now. Chris Cash and Nick Paglino on The Voice of Wrestling. New segment called Tag In, Tag Out. And Nick, it's really simple. If you like it, you tag in. If you dislike it, you tag out. We did this last week, so make sure you go check out last week's edition of The Voice of Wrestling, of course, on our website, voiceofwrestling.net, or you can check us out on our YouTube channel as well, all of our episodes there. But it's really simple. We're going to run down real quick some of the main guys that headed over from Raw to SmackDown, and then, of course, talk a little bit about which show actually won, as it turns out. But, Nick, we did have a couple of decent guys. You called it. You expected Jeff Hardy, so we'll start off there. Jeff Hardy moves over to SmackDown from Raw after winning the United States Championship from Jinder Mahal, which broke my heart. But regardless, do you tag in or tag out on Jeff Hardy moving over to SmackDown?
Yeah, I'm going to tag in on this one. I think he may have have sort of been lost in the shuffle over there on Raw. I also think it was a good idea to get him away from Matt Hardy. You've got plenty of time down the line to do some of that Brother Nero stuff if you want to eventually have him pair up with Matt Hardy. Plus, I like the pairing of Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy more so than I do Matt and Jeff. It just feels more fresh. So I think pulling him over to SmackDown, having that title, we don't know yet what's going to happen, of course, at the Greatest Royal Rumble. Jeff Hardy, of course, could lose that title to a guy like Jinder Mahal. I don't actually expect that to happen, but we do have that match. Jinder Mahal versus Jeff Hardy. And then, of course, the winner of that match will be facing Randy Orton for the title at Backlash. So, if the idea is to keep the United States title on SmackDown, which is definitely what I think is going to happen, I don't see both titles ending up on one brand. It would make more sense then that if Jeff Hardy does lose to Jinder Mahal, we definitely know Randy Orton's going to be winning that match at Backlash to keep the title over on the SmackDown side. But I'm going to go with it, and this will just offer sort of a Greatest Royal Rumble prediction. I'm going to say Jeff Hardy retains over Jinder Mahal on Friday at the Greatest Royal Rumble, keeping the title over on SmackDown, and I'm going to tag in on Jeff Hardy over on SmackDown. I think it was a good move for him.
Yeah, I think Jeff retains, obviously, this Friday, but I also say I tag in on it just only because I think getting away from Matt is really the only reason they needed to do this. I think Jeff, when you think back at his last major singles run before he went off, he was unhappy with wrestling, but of course then he shows up in TNA again and works there. Didn't really know if he'd ever come back to WWE, but here we are. And if you recall back then, he was really off the races on SmackDown. I mean, they were giving him a major push, and it was working. I mean, Jeff Hardy was as big as anybody back then. I don't know that he's ever going to get to that point. I don't think they're ever going to put enough faith in him and trust in him to really maybe put him over to that degree, but it's clear they still have faith in him. And I think he's at a different place in his life. I don't think you have to worry as much now about some of the things that maybe you had to worry about in Jeff Hardy's past. Therefore, I like him as a United States champion. I like him on SmackDown. I like him as kind of just a really good, feel-good, nostalgic guy that still has a great presence wherever he's at. And most importantly, I tag in specifically on the fact that WWE is tagging out on keeping him tied up with his brother, which I think is just kind of in and of itself, either you love it or you hate it with what's going on with Matt and Bray. I'm mixed emotions. We'll have to talk about that next week. But nevertheless, another big name, Nick, that I wasn't surprised by. I really expected this. Samoa Joe moves over to SmackDown. Even though he's got the Roman Reigns Backlash match, regardless of what happens with Brock, it's already set up for Samoa Joe to face Roman Reigns at Backlash. And it's an interesting move for that because of that in and of itself. But I think most people are pretty high on this move, with him being over there with a crop of talent that I think most people, at least, and we'll talk about this for a minute before we get off the air, think SmackDown won out on the actual talent as far as wrestling goes. But Samoa Joe, without a question, in addition to that. So Nick, tag in, tag out Samoa Joe over to SmackDown.
Absolutely. I'm going to tag in on this one. This really, to me, felt like the biggest move in the overall Superstar Shakeup. I think Samoa Joe, it has the most potential of thriving from this Superstar Shakeup over anyone else. And that's also why, again, to agree with you there, to sort of piggyback off of what you just said, that's why I do at the end of the day think SmackDown won the Superstar Shakeup. It's because of Samoa Joe. If you really look at the guys who have the potential to either become main event players or to be serious contenders on the blue brand after the Superstar Shakeup, and then just in general, guys who can make the biggest impact from the move, I think you're seeing it on the SmackDown side. And namely with Samoa Joe. I expect Samoa Joe to become the top heel on the SmackDown brand, and thereby become, and Chris, you and I were talking a little bit about this off the air. I think we both firmly believe Samoa Joe could be arguably the top heel in WWE as it is right now. Even before the Superstar Shakeup. So moving him over to SmackDown, I think, is really going to solidify him as the top heel in WWE.
Yeah, I'm tagging in completely on this as well, and I'm with you 100%. I would have been fine if he stayed on Raw. The problem is he's going to be overshadowed too much by their need, and we talked about this at the beginning of the show, to push Roman Reigns. And Samoa Joe's kind of standing in the way of that, the way they've already put him in immediate in that immediate path of Roman Reigns, and I feel like they've got to be very careful. I'm really hopeful that Backlash won't derail Samoa Joe's momentum right now at any cost. And I know that in WWE's eyes, it'll be at Roman Reigns' cost. And I feel like that's a dangerous line right now when you have someone as polished, as seasoned as Samoa Joe, and is just simply as talented as he is, because not only is he a unique look and he's good in the ring, but Nick, I honestly, hand to the heart, believe that Samoa Joe is the best promo guy in the business right now. I really, truly believe that. So tag in all the way. I don't think it would matter where Samoa Joe goes. I would be tagging in on following him there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they really play this out, because I agree with you. SmackDown is at least a place where he can truly shine if they give him that opportunity. And I'm looking forward to AJ Styles, Samoa Joe again. We've seen that in years past, obviously, and it was phenomenal. No pun intended. So I think I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to Samoa Joe with a lot of people. The other big name, Nick, real quick, before we kind of group everybody else together, because I don't think there's a whole lot of other guys worth really going into a lot of time about. But Asuka, obviously, was an interesting choice, only because you kind of think somebody needs to be that real next big match for a Ronda Rousey, when you know they're probably setting up Charlotte and Ronda for WrestleMania next year. We just heard she's going to be wrestling Mickie James, and we assume that Natalya is probably in her future as well. But other than that, it seems maybe a little lost over on the Raw side as it relates to Ronda until she's ready to be set up for Charlotte. But moving Asuka over to SmackDown, and for that reason, I kind of feel like Asuka could have been a somewhat, and I know this sounds bad to say because of how over she's been and the path that she's taken to get here, but maybe a stepping stone for Ronda Rousey to Charlotte. And I mean, but not in a bad way, in a sense that Ronda needs a big match at a SummerSlam, maybe Rumble next year. I mean, somewhere along the way, she needs a pretty big high-profile match, and I'm not sure where that comes from now, unless you're going to really cross-pollinate Ronda with Asuka and Charlotte, regardless of what brand they're on. But I'm tagging out only because I feel like Asuka kind of filled that void, and I definitely don't even if it's babyface versus babyface, you don't want to turn Asuka heel. I get all that. I think just Ronda and Asuka is a match that people would be interested in, however they decide to tell that story. So I'm tagging out because I don't think SmackDown necessarily needed it. It's a small tag out though, Nick, because I really don't mind it at the end of the day. I just wonder why they're doing this as it relates to Ronda and what her place is for the next year, as we assume they're inevitably building up to Charlotte and Ronda at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I mean, look, and you've got that build, that really honestly doesn't need to start happening until probably January of next year.
Sure, yeah.
So you've got plenty of time. I mean, heck, you could slow burn this for a while in terms of having Ronda Rousey working with someone like a Mickie James, at the next pay-per-view, or you could even have the tag match at the next pay-per-view. You can have the singles match potentially taking place in June, where you're really not getting that Rousey versus Natalya singles match until SummerSlam. And then after SummerSlam, if you take a look at some of the women that are already on Raw, she could obviously face someone like an Ember Moon, and I think Ember Moon could get a good rub from even losing to someone like, a Ronda Rousey. She could, of course, work with any of the members of the Riot Squad. Ruby Riott would be someone else that she could go through. So really, if you were to highlight single women to have those feuds with, you've got ladies like Ember Moon, Ruby Riott, even potentially someone like a Liv Morgan or a Sarah Logan, depending on how much they actually build them up. And you could even do something with Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax or Alexa Bliss, depending on what they do with the title picture. I don't really see Ronda Rousey sliding in the title picture anytime soon, but the thing is, it doesn't make much sense if they're going to eventually build to Ronda Rousey versus Flair for maybe the SmackDown Women's title at WrestleMania 35. It doesn't make sense for her to, at no point in between there, challenge for the Raw title.
Sure.
Because she is on Raw. So, once you start getting into the later months of the year, when you get into November, when you get into December, you could see some programs there with Nia Jax, with Alexa Bliss, whoever the Raw champion is. So, I'm going to tag in on Asuka over on the SmackDown side, just because, you could really sort of have some fresh matchups there for her on SmackDown. And, of course, then maybe a really good long-term feud that could, maybe it ends up in some kind of a big stipulation match like a Hell in a Cell or a ladder match or something that, we have yet to see the women in, a TLC match, something like that Asuka and Charlotte could have and they could break ground with, and it could be something a bit more historical for the two of them in a long-term feud over on SmackDown. So I like it. I like it for Ronda Rousey on Raw. I like it for Asuka over on SmackDown. I'm going to tag in on it.
So we know The Miz obviously came over. We knew that. However, during the Raw edition of the Superstar Shakeup, Big Cass is back. He's on SmackDown. We've got Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville that went over there. Peyton Royce is over there as well. Billie Kay on SmackDown. Eric Young is on SmackDown. We've got Alexander Wolf. We've got Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, a tag team that moved over, along with Sheamus and Cesaro, who moved over to SmackDown. We've got R-Truth, of course, that moved over to SmackDown. We've got Andrade Cien Almas as well, Nick, coming up to SmackDown, that a lot of people are really interested in, and apparently some reports out there that there's some big plans for him on SmackDown as far as, or just in WWE in general, but obviously on SmackDown since that's where he's at. So, Nick, any of those guys stand out to you as far as anybody that you want to tag in on specifically or tag out on specifically?
Yeah, and again, I think this is what I think I might do is just sort of, again, help sort of my overall comment here that I think SmackDown really won the Superstar Shakeup, because I think a lot of these names that you've mentioned, they have more potential to really solidify themselves. And again, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be big main event players, but really do some great stuff over on SmackDown. I think they have more potential to make names for themselves on SmackDown than some of the people that moved over to Raw.
Right.
We talked about this with some of the Raw moves. The guys like Jinder Mahal's and the Singh brothers, even, potentially even Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who, are still that tag team, and they're kind of being used as that comedy act that, nobody wants them on their brand, and they're in that situation where they're whining against the babyface authority figure, guys like your Tyler Breezes and Zack Ryders and Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre, the Ascension. All of these guys I tagged out on. Right. I really don't, the Mojo Rawleys, the Mike Kanellises, even Bobby Roode.
Yeah.
These are guys that I fear are going to get lost in the shuffle. I could be surprised, and you could see a guy like a Dolph Ziggler emerge, even though I don't expect it. You could see a Bobby Roode emerge. You could see your favorite wrestler of all time in the history of all of professional wrestling. Even probably your favorite athlete of all time in any sport ever. Probably your favorite actor, entertainer, your favorite hairstylist, your favorite musician, your favorite pet, your favorite
He's
anything
he's
you
just
want
a
to name.
favorite mammal in
Jinder
general.
Mahal,
Yeah.
your all-time favorite human.
Yeah.
Even he could maybe emerge as something a little bit more than a mid-card guy on Raw, but I don't think that's going to happen. Ultimately, I don't see as many of these names emerging as I do with the guys on SmackDown. A lot of these names I'm tagging in on. The Miz, obviously, working with Daniel Bryan, that should be a very hot program. I really like the Iconics over on SmackDown. I think they have something unique. We talked about Jeff Hardy. I like Eric Young Insanity. I think there'll be a good stable over there that we're not getting enough of in WWE. Big Cass. I think he's going to be a big player over on SmackDown. Sheamus and Cesaro. Obviously, they're a tag team that, obviously these guys aren't going to be pushed to the moon, but, you could see some good, fresh matchups there. Even guys like Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, who, I might be on the fence there. I might tag out there because WWE just doesn't seem behind those guys. Even that opens up the potential, for some fresh matchups, maybe with them and the Usos, maybe them and the New Day. Andrade Cien Almas. I'm tagging in on this guy because of Zelina Vega.
Passionate about what she does.
I love working for Kashi. It's all
If
about.
Almas was on his own, I would tag out on this all day long.
Yeah.
Because WWE, they never really seem to get behind that Latino star like they should. They're always looking for the next Rey Mysterio, but they never seem to push a guy in that capacity. But I think Zelina Vega is the difference maker here. She's an excellent mouthpiece. She's a great companion, great manager, a great piece of that puzzle that I think has been missing from other Latin stars that WWE wants to get behind. I think the team has worked really well in NXT. I think they'll transfer over to SmackDown well. So I'm really tagging in on a lot
SmackDown
of these guys.
in general.
And on the whole, I'm tagging in on the Superstar Shakeup for the Blue brand.
Yeah.
Because I think they've got a lot of potential there.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm only tagging in because I'm really interested to see all these guys play it out on SmackDown. But I disagree to a slight degree as we wrap up with you on the fact that I think because you still have AJ Styles and Nakamura, Daniel Bryan now there. I do think it might be a little more difficult for some of these guys, and of course Samoa Joe, who we both agree is going to be a big player there, to kind of rise up the ranks on the SmackDown side of things. I just feel like it might be a little more complicated for some of these guys to maybe stand out the way they could otherwise. But I think that's give or take anywhere you go. I don't know that Raw is going to make it easier on anybody else for the same reasons. But I'm tagging it on SmackDown just because I think overall, from a talent standpoint and what I'm looking forward to see in some of these matchups, Daniel Bryan and The Miz, obviously, Nakamura and AJ Styles are continuing their feud, and I think that's going well right now with Nakamura as a heel. And then, of course, Samoa Joe rising up the ranks. I'm really looking forward to the blue brand as well going forward. So that's going to be interesting, tagging in on SmackDown, both of us. And Nick, I think people are really interested in what's going to happen this Friday. I think WWE's at least done a good job at this point of actually making it out to be a legitimate event. And I know that next week won't be the week, Nick, as we mentioned earlier, where you and I don't have something to talk about, because I think the Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar match is going to leave a discussion there. I think the winner of the actual Royal Rumble itself is going to be a cause for discussion. Some of these other matches, obviously Rusev, Undertaker. I think all of this is going to give us plenty to talk about next week as well. So I'm looking forward to it. And guys, I really appreciate you checking out the Voice of Wrestling right here on voiceofwrestling.net. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Of course, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We've got some big things coming up. Check out prowrestling.com for all your wrestling news. Nick is, of course, the managing editor over there. Make sure you check them out. And as always, download the Fight app, F-I-T-E, and also fight.tv. You can check out the Voice of Wrestling show there every Wednesday as well. And Nick, I'm pretty sure we've got a little special guest, as long as everything stands true, that we're going to be bringing on next week, right?
Yeah, we're going to be bringing on SoCal Val, who also does a lot of work with Fight TV.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking to her a little bit about the women's revolution, get her reaction to WWE traveling over to Saudi Arabia. So we should get some good comments from her. And, of course, you can check out a lot of her work over at Fight TV as well.
SoCal Val, always the sweetheart. Can't wait to talk to her again next week on The Voice of Wrestling. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the Greatest Royal Rumble event this Friday. For Nick Paglino, I'm Chris Cash. This is The Voice of Wrestling. We'll see you next week.